Hey there, everybody. Miss Monis back with some more from my favorite book, The Phantom Tollbooth. We left off in chapter 11 right after Milo and Talk and the Humbug met a doctor. And he said his name was Cophonis A. Discord, Doctor of Dissonance. As loud as possible, bellowed the doctor, and two screeches and a bump accompanied his response. Now step a little closer and stick out your tongue. Just as I suspected, he continued, opening a large dusty book and thumbing through the pages. You're suffering from a severe lack of noise. Remember, he was examining Milo because he thought he didn't look well. The doctor began to jump around the wagon, snatching bottles from the shelves until he had a large assortment in various colors and sizes collected at one end of the table. All were neatly labeled. Loud cries, soft cries, bangs, bongs, smashes, crashes, swishes, swooshes, snaps and crackles, whistles and gongs, squeaks, squawks, and miscellaneous uproar. After pouring a little of each into a large glass beaker, he stirred the mixture thoroughly with a wooden spoon, watching intently as it smoked and steamed and boiled and bubbled. Be ready in just a moment, he exclaimed, rubbing his hands. Milo had never seen such an unpleasant-looking medicine and wasn't at all anxious to try any. Just what kind of doctor are you? He asked suspiciously. Well, you might say, I'm a specialist, said the doctor. I specialize in noise, all kinds, from the loudest to the softest, and from the slightly annoying to the terribly unpleasant. For instance, have you ever heard a square-wheeled steamroller ride over a street full of hard-boiled eggs? He asked. And as he did, all that could be heard were loud crunching sounds. But who would want all those terrible noises? Asked Milo, holding his ears. Everybody does, said the surprised doctor. They're very popular today. Why, I'm kept so busy I can hardly fill the orders for noise pills, racket lotion, clamor salve, and humbug tonic. That's all people seem to want these days. He stirred the beaker of liquid a few more times, and then, as the steam cleared, he continued. Business wasn't always so good. Years ago, everyone wanted pleasant sounds, and except for a few orders during wars and earthquakes, things were very bad. But then the big cities were built, and there was a great need for honking horns, screeching tires, clanging bells, deafening shouts, piercing shrieks, gurgling drains, and all the rest of those wonderfully unpleasant sounds we use so much today. Without them, people would be very unhappy, so I make sure that they get as much as they want. Why, if you take a little of my medicine every day, you'll never hear a beautiful sound again. Here, try some. If it's all the same to you, I'd rather not, said the humbug, backing away to the far corner of the wagon. I don't want to be cured of beautiful sounds, insisted Milo. Besides, growled Talk, who decided that he didn't much like Dr. Discord. There is no such illness as lack of noise. Of course not, replied the doctor, pouring himself a small glass of the liquid. That's what makes it so difficult to cure. I only treat illnesses that don't exist. That way, if I can't cure them, there's no harm done. And just one of the precautions of the trade, he concluded. And seeing that no one was about to take his medicine, he again reached toward the shelf, removed a dark amber bottle, dusted it carefully, and placed it on the table in front of him. Very well, if you want to go through your life suffering from a noise deficiency, I'll give it all to the Dine for his lunch. And he uncorked the bottle with a hollow-sounding pop. For a moment, everything was quiet as Milo, Talk, and the humbug looked intently at the bottle, wondering what Dr. Discord would do next. Then, very faintly at first, they heard a low rumbling that sounded miles away. It grew louder and louder and louder and closer and closer and closer until it became deafening, ear-splitting roaring that seemed to be coming from inside the tiny bottle. Then, from the bottle, a thick bluish smog spiraled to the ceiling, spread out, and gradually assumed the shape of a thick bluish smog with hands, feet, bright yellow eyes, and a large frowning mouth. As soon as the smog had gotten completely out of the bottle, It grasped the beaker of liquid, tilted back what would have been its head, and drank it in 3 gulps. "Ah, that was good, master," bellowed the Smog, shaking the whole wagon. "I thought you'd never let me out. Terribly cramped in there." "This is my assistant, the awful Dine," said Dr. Discord. "You must forgive his appearance, for he really doesn't have any. You see, he is an orphan whom I raised without benefit of governess or any assistance." "No nurse is good nurse," interrupted the Dine, doubling up with laughter, if you can imagine a thick blue Smog doubling up with laughter. "For I found him," continued the doctor, ignoring his outburst, "living alone and unwanted in an abandoned soda bottle, without family or relatives." "No niece is good niece," roared the Dine again, with a laugh that sounded like several sirens going off all at once, and he slapped it where his knee would have been. "And I brought him here," continued the exasperated Discord, "where despite his lack of shape or features, I trained." "No nose is a good nose," thundered Dine once again as he collapsed in another fit of hysterics and clutched his sides. "I trained him as my assistant in the business of concocting and dispensing noise," finished the doctor, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "No noise is good noise," exclaimed the humbug happily, trying to catch in on the spirit of all things. "That's not funny at all," sobbed the Dine, who went to a corner and sulked. "What is a Dine?" asked Milo when he had recovered from the shock of seeing him appear. "You mean you've never met the awful Dine before?" said Dr. Discord in a surprised tone. "Well, I thought everyone had. When you're playing in your room and making a great amount of noise, what do they tell you to stop?" "That awful din," admitted Milo. "When the neighbors are playing their radio too loud late at night, what do you wish they'd turn down?" "That awful din," answered Talk. "When the street on your block is being repaired and the drills are working all day, what does everyone complain of?" "The dreadful row," volunteered the humbug brightly. "The dreadful roar," cried the anguished Dine, "was my grandfather. He perished in the Great Silence epidemic of 1712. Milo felt so sorry for the unhappy Dine that he gave him his handkerchief, which was immediately covered in bluish, smoggy tears. "Thank you," groaned the Dine. "That was very kind. But I certainly can't understand why you don't like noise," he said. "Why, I heard an explosion last week that was so lovely I cried for 2 days." The very thought of it upset him so much that he began to sob all over again in a way that sounded almost exactly like a handful of fingernails being scratched across a mile-long blackboard. He buried his head in the doctor's lap. There's a picture of him with Milo. "He's very sensitive, isn't he?" asked Milo, trying to comfort the emotional Dine. "It's true," agreed Dr. Discord, "but he's right. You know, for noise is the most valuable thing in the world." "King Azaz says words are," said Milo. "Nonsense," the doctor roared. "Why, when a baby wants food, how does he ask?" "He screams," answered the Dine, looking happily. "And when an automobile wants gas, it chokes," he shouted again, jumping for joy. "When a river wants water, what does it do? It creaks," bellowed the Dine as he collapsed into a fit of uncontrollable laughter. "And what happens when a new day begins? It breaks," he gasped joyfully from the floor, a look of utter bliss covering his face. "You see how simple it is," the doctor said to Milo, who didn't see at all. And then, turning to the tear-stained, smiling Dine, he remarked, "Isn't it time for you to go?" "Where to?" said Milo. "Perhaps we're going the same way." "I think not," the Dine replied, picking up an armful of empty sacks from the table, "for I am going on my noise collection rounds. You see, once a day I travel throughout the kingdom and collect all the wonderfully, horribly, and beautifully unpleasant noises that have been made. I pack them into my sacks and bring them back here for the doctor to make his medicines from." "And a good job he does," said Dr. Discord, pounding his fist on the table. "So wherever the noise is, that's where you'll find me," said the Dine with an appreciative smile. "And I must hurry along, for I understand that today There's to be a screech, several loud crashes, and a bit of a pandemonium. And in which direction are you going? Asked the doctor, mixing another brew. To Digitopolis, replied Milo. How unfortunate, he said, as the Dine shuffled through the door. How very unfortunate, for you must pass through the Valley of Sound. Is it bad? Asked the perpetually worried humbug. The Dine paused in the doorway with a look of extreme horror on his almost featureless face, and the doctor shuddered in a way that sounded very much like a fast-moving freight train being derailed into a mountain of custard. Well, you might ask, for you will find out soon enough, was all he would say as he sadly bade them farewell, and the Dine galloped off on his rounds. And the next chapter is the Silent Valley. That must be the valley that the doctor is talking about. All right, tune in next time for the Silent Valley.